To support this motion on behalf of the ACT Party. We could hardly do otherwise, Mr Speaker. The Non-Proliferation Treaty is a bit like mum and apple pie. No one could possibly be against it. Motherhood, thank you. It's been around for many years. Even the sponsor of the resolution was unable to tell me exactly when, but we settled on many years prior to the Cold War. And, Mr Speaker, certainly times change. I recall being at university in the late 80s where I joined my fellow students who were 10 years younger in tittering sneeringly at the idea that MAD, mad, mutually assured destruction, was indeed mad in small letters. But here we are 20 years later, and I actually wonder whether, in fact, MAD did work, and the thought of, or the certainty of mutual annihilation prevented it happening. But as times have changed, the Cold War's over, Mr Speaker. One thing that hasn't, I recall it at university 20 years ago, nuclear terrorism had already been identified as a threat for the future. Universities don't, or university dons don't always get things right, but they were right with that one. Global thermonuclear war is probably never going to happen, thank God, but nuclear terrorism sadly probably will. The NPT rationale was to keep the nuclear club no larger than it was when the treaty was first entered into. It failed. Israel, South Africa, North Korea, India, Pakistan and probably Iran, we now know not Iraq, got weapons anyway, so in that sense it was a failure. But however, no one can disagree, as I said at the beginning, with strengthening the NPT and re-injecting life into it. That can only be a good thing. But, Mr Speaker, as I've said, times have changed. The real threat that was predicted in the late 80s has now come to pass, and I believe the bomb that was let off in New York the other day, I may be mistaken, but I believe there's a suggestion that it was indeed a dirty bomb, a so-called explosive bomb designed to fling fissile material about, not a nuclear device as such. Mr Speaker, that's the real threat. It doesn't much matter, sadly, even if Dr. Graham's fantasy comes true and all of the members of the club and the non-members of the club disarm. There will still be a whole heap of fissile material floating around the world to fall into the hands of radical Islamic terrorists or any other terrorists for that matter. That's the real threat, and it doesn't matter how well the NPT machinery does its job, Mr Speaker. The real task is to eliminate fissile material from the world, and that is not going to be easy. It is a major problem. We should, of course, support, notwithstanding that, we should support disarmament, nuclear disarmament. Of course we should. The world can only be a better place without weapons of mass destruction. But we also need to face the fact that we have a major problem with nuclear terrorism, sadly linked to religious radicalism, but not solely. And the next challenge will be not, I believe, disarming the superpowers, the members of the club and the non-members of the club, but accounting for and containing, if not destroying, the fissile material that could well destroy us in the hands of people who are not only unafraid to die, but very keen to. And that is a whole new concern and a great worry. But we are certainly in favour of this resolution. Thank you.
Call te oro Flavel.